everyone. We're going to get started for the day. Welcome and thank you for joining us for day 5 of our week-long student-run conference, Study Tips for the New Year and Beyond. Before the presentation, just a few quick reminders. We would like to record this presentation. However, if you are uncomfortable being a participant in a recorded webinar for any reason, please send our host, Liz, a message now before the presentation starts. Next, this conference is organized by student volunteers and presented through the Launch School community. So we will be following Launch School's Code of Conduct. If you have any specific questions about the Code of Conduct, feel free to message myself or Liz directly. In short, the rules are simple. Be kind and open-minded. During the presentation today, there may be a few opportunities for discussion. For this, we will be using the raise hand feature located at the bottom of the screen. If you'd like to speak, please click the raise hand button and we will unmute you temporarily. At the end of the presentation, we'll have a brief time for questions and answers. To facilitate this, we'll be using the Q&A feature at the bottom of your screen to manage all of the questions you might have today. If you do have a question, please post it in the Q&A area and not in the chat. This will help us keep track of the questions and make sure all the questions are answered. Last of all, we still have several exciting student-led sessions yet to come this week. On Friday, January 8 at 3 p.m. Eastern Standard Time, Jose will be giving his lightning talk, Dangerous Intuitions, 3 common intuitions that make learning harder, and what you should do instead, followed shortly by Liz's Study Reflection Stand-Up, which will be a reflection for everyone to contribute their takeaways from this week's sessions. Saturday, January 9 at 2 p.m. Eastern Standard Time, Julius will be giving a presentation called Building Tacit Knowledge in Software Development. And then Sunday, our last session will be at 2 p.m. Eastern Standard Time, where Callie will present how to practice problem solving alone and with others. To find out more about any of these sessions or to RSVP, visit the social network channel on Slack. With that, I'll turn it over to Jesse.
Hello, everyone. I'll be making the presentation today titled Journey to Mastery in Programming Fundamentals, Principles and Practices. My name is Jesse Ikenna Ikuribe. Just to give you a bit of background about myself, I'm a Nigerian and I live in Lagos, Nigeria. I'm currently studying the Arabic 101 course. My background is in accounting and I studied accounting for my undergraduate degree at the University of Nigeria. One more thing also about myself is that I'm a Nigerian Army veteran. And in terms of my interests, I'm a serious amateur photographer. Yeah, I love visual storytelling. Though I haven't practiced photography in a while due to long school. Yeah, and in terms of the languages I speak basic French and German. I also speak Igbo, which is my native language, and English as well, which will be the language of instruction for this presentation. Yeah, let's dive in. So in this presentation, we'll be having 2 phases. The first phase will be focused on understanding the need for mastery in programming fundamentals, what mastery means in simple terms, principles on how mastery can be developed and attained in Launch School courses and generally in the Launch School program. So yeah, the problem. Yeah, what's the problem? You see there are lots of posts talking about programmers not being able to program, more like they go for interviews and you realize that most of them can't really solve simple programming problems that would show the level of more like their abilities to handle higher programs or just basic things that maybe we are quite skilled with at Launch School. So that's the problem. And to work on complex software systems, you need to have a strong foundation. But from these blog posts, you realize that there are programmers who can't really program. And that's the problem. Why is that? Why does this problem exist? Why do we have the problem of programmers who can't program? This is because such so-called programmers launch themselves without developing and attaining mastery in the fundamentals. This is the reason developing mastery in programming fundamentals is important. So we'll talk about I would like to ask you a question. What does mastery mean to you? I want you to take some time to think about this because, you know, mastery tends to be used a lot in Launch School. And we it's just it's a popular lingo in law school, and we just tend to take up the definitions given to us. But I want you to think about it, because a thoughtful response to this question will help you determine and evaluate whether you've attained mastery in any component skill for which mastery is required in the law school program. You know, but in my personal definition, mastery means attaining proficiency in understanding, application, and practice of essential knowledge and skills, and being able to integrate them fluently towards a specific purpose. So, and what mastery is not, what is mastery? Mastery is not about being the best. It's not about being the fastest or being the slowest. It's about developing proficiency. And that should be the focus as you move on your journey. We want to delve further to discuss about the components of mastery. So one thing I would like to point out is that the first component of mastery has to do with obtaining knowledge. You know, you cannot develop mastery in something you haven't acquired knowledge on. It's impossible to develop mastery in something you know nothing about. Mastery is not attained by chance or accidentally. And the first step to mastery is to acquire knowledge. You know, for example, when I was going through the prep course, I came across some concepts, but and some terms, programming terms and stuff like variables and methods. I learned that you could assign objects to variables, and you know, you could define methods to address a specific task. I learned this. I obtained knowledge. I learned the anatomy of how to construct a method. I learned how to go about these things. I didn't just gloss over them. I learned how to use them. And it's very important to know that awareness is not equivalent to acquiring knowledge or a mental model. So if you're just aware of something, you've not obtained knowledge on it. And for example, I think in Slack, I think there was one of the channels there, somebody posted about HTTP request and response cycle. I think that's something that is done in further courses or stuff. So more like, I was quite curious. So I just became aware of it, and I even searched it on Google. And it's, I just gained awareness of that. I had no, I did not acquire knowledge on it, or I have no mental model on how that works. So that's a different thing. So the first component of mastery is to obtain knowledge. So, and it's very important that you do that in your learning. Yeah, so the next thing we're talking about, which is the second component of mastery, is to develop proficiency in component skills through practice. This entails developing proficiency in understanding, applying, and practicing independently, you know, the knowledge you've obtained, the knowledge and mental models you've obtained. You know, for example, when you obtain knowledge, in terms of how a method works and stuff like that, I had to learn how to, you know, to write methods, to define methods, to use them. I had to develop proficiency in the use of methods and also variables as well. And when you're talking about variables, issues of variables as pointers, there are other things too that I needed to practice, because just knowing about variables actually has a wide scope. Talking about variable scope, talking about variable scope, variables as pointers, I needed to learn and become proficient in these things to be able to, I needed to learn to become proficient in them independently. And finally, the last component has to do with developing proficiency in integrating component skills and knowledge through practice. You know, this component of mastery, you know, entails developing proficiency in the practice of integrating individual concepts, principles, and skills, and knowing when and where to apply each towards solving programming exercises, building projects, or creating novel solutions to practical problems. So it's at this stage that mastery is attained. Unlike this is it's a wholesome. It completes the process of mastery, and it's at this phase we are tested for mastery in launch school. So when you're going for launch school assessment, you are being tested for proficiency in integrating different components, you know, different skills, the knowledge you've gained, the knowledge of principles, all the necessary things of syntax, sort of thing. You are being tested to more like in a way to you're tested, you're tested, the test is to integrate these different components, to integrate them towards solving a particular programming exercise, and you have to do that in a fluent way. And when you don't, when you don't pass this, it means that you've not come to that place. And it's important to know that each of these components actually require different skills. This for the fact that I can practice, I understand and I can proficiently practice variables as pointers doesn't mean that when I'm trying to integrate it, that it will just become easy. For example, doing that, practicing independently is different from the skill I need to practice independently is different from the skill I need to integrate all these components. So it's important to have this in mind and evaluate yourself in the light of this as you learn in the Launch School program. I think it will help you. It's just an approach. You might have other approaches to test for mastery, but this is something that will help you test for mastery based on my own experience. So we'll be going to the second phase of the presentation, which will be focused on practices. And what we'll be talking about is the journey to mastery. You know, we see that the journey to mastery entails obtaining knowledge, the components more like the obtaining knowledge, develop proficiency in component skills through practice, and develop proficiency in integrating component skills, you know, through practice. This, you know, the application of these elements depends on the programming course or your knowledge, or your knowledge level. And because we are humans, there are different factors that influence how moving through these components of mastery works out for each individual. You know, they are different. We are different, and the way this works out for us actually differs. We are robots. Otherwise, we would have just programmed this, and it would just be obtain knowledge. You know, develop proficiency in component skills through practice, develop proficiency in integrating component skills, and that would be it. But we are human beings, and this happens in various ways for each individual. So that will be the focus of the rest of the presentation. First, first on this, I'd like to talk about crafting your journey to mastery. You see, it is your journey. It's your journey. You see these charts, the charts there, you see from, I'm actually in the Ruby track. So the JS track guys can actually, they should bear with us on this. So this, we start with RB 101. Sorry, we start with RB 100. And at that point, we all start at the same level and we move on. And for those on Ruby track, we take RB 100. This actually shows various points on our journey. And we come to a place where we are tested for mastery. We are tested for mastery. That's what you see the destination icon there actually refers to the point where you are checked or you're assessed for mastery before you move on your journey. So this is the launch school. This is the launch school's process. So you are tested, you are assessed for mastery before you move on. And the other icon there with the pie charts with the circular, this just represents the components of mastery. So you're tested there, and after you're tested, you still continue your journey. You move on. You know, so if you are in RB 101, or the line that leads to the checkpoint or the place, the destination, you know, in terms of where you're assessed, you know, it's actually the part of your journey where you obtain knowledge, you develop proficiency in component skills, and you develop proficiency in integrating these skills. And you are checked on each of them. So I think you should just look out for where you are on this, graph, on this chart here, and you see how you've progressed on your journey. And for those ones without checkpoints, those are places where you are given practical projects to work on, to test your ability to integrate the skills you've actually learned, you know, up until that time. You know, it's important to trust the Launch School program as a roadmap to your destination, and also to trust the process because it is designed to lead you to your intended destination. It's important to know that the journey to mastery is both incremental and secular. So you're making progress incrementally, and you are repeating the same cycle of things, and it builds up towards attaining mastery. Okay, we'll move on to the next slide. So I would like to highlight the fact that the journey to mastery is a personal journey. Your journey to mastery, is a personal learning journey. So there's no need to take. So there is a great need for you to take personal responsibility and make personal commitments to get to your destination. And it's important that you don't downplay the progress you've made on your journey because of the performance of others. Always remember that it's a personal journey. So I would like to share briefly how I started my journey. When I started law school, I had zero programming experience. And it actually froze the first time I tried live coding practice with a student. And I felt like a dummy after, after that session. And the student didn't help matters because the student never reached out to me afterwards. So I felt terrible, and I wondered if launch school was for me. Another thing is that I experienced difficulty studying on my laptop for more than 30 minutes when I started prep, because once I exceed 30 minutes, I start experiencing severe headaches, and for the rest of the day, I can't do any form of studying. And also, one more thing I would like to share is I experienced, and I still experience, power cuts on a daily basis for more than 12 hours. And the hours for which power supply is restored within my locality is during bedtime. This is an issue of concern for me because I'm studying full-time in an online program. Why am I talking about how I started my journey? Because when I look at myself now, when I look how far I've gone, when I look at the excuses I would have given myself, not to move further, when I consider the negative thoughts that would have deterred me from my journey, I put them aside and I moved on. And now, actually, I've made a lot of progress on my journey. I can study I can study on my laptop for close to 6 hours, I've made a lot of progress. I can live code with confidence, yeah. And I've gained knowledge on several programming principles and concepts. And, it's progress for me. So that's how I started my journey. I want you to take some time to think about how you started your journey and ponder on where you are now on your journey. And that will help give you a sense of the progress you've made. It's important to have a sense of progress on your journey, because you're not just on a you're not just on a spot, but you're moving. Even if you can't see it, it's not tangible, but you're making progress. Yeah. So to give you some tips on how to craft your journey, I would like to point out that you start with a destination in mind. It's important that when I mean we start with a destination in mind. When you're every journey has a starting point, and there is an intended destination. When you embark on a journey, you have an intended destination. So as you're in the launch school program, I want you to think, so what destination did you have in mind when you started the program? What are you thinking about? What did you want to get out of it? Where do you want it to take you to? So it's important that you make this personal and not just adopt launch school's goals. Use launch school as a roadmap. What I would like to, for me, I would like to point out my own personal story with respect to my own destination. When I was in secondary school, that's what you guys call high school in the US. So I went to a military school. It's called Nigerian Military School in Zaria. It was a boarding school. It's a boarding school, and I was many kilometers away from home. And the only way I could actually communicate with my family was by writing letters, and I would send them via post. And most times I only get a response 2 months later. That was quite ineffective as a means of communication. And after a couple of years, I got access to a computer, and I was able to access the internet as well. I opened an email service, that's Yahoo then. And I opened an email service. I was able to communicate easily and efficiently, by just typing and sending a message. And that actually opened my eyes to the value that software products can create. So this actually, this is what inspired my journey. And from that time, I had in mind that I would like to, learn to program, and I would want to. I'm doing this with the goal of being able to create value through software products or services, just as I've experienced, And this is what inspired my journey. So as I'm learning this, I'm having in mind that as my destination, this is the destination I want to get to, being able to create value through software products for others. So I would like to ask you, what destination did you have in mind when you started Launch School? It's important you set this clear because it will help you, it will give you clarity for your journey, and you'll have a sense of direction. So Launch School is a roadmap to lead you there. And your destination may not really, there are several Launch School students who started their journey, and based on what they wanted, they actually left the program even before finishing core, and they're doing quite well in whatever they're doing. So have a sense of where you're going to. That will help you. Next, we'll be talking about learning at your own pace. I think this is an important point to raise here, because there are a lot of factors that can influence the pace of learning. And it's important to know that mastery is not in the pace. Rather, it's in the outcome of learning. Learning at your own pace implies that you understand how you learn, that's your learning style, and that you are consistent with your learning based on the time you've allotted to it. And also, learning at your own pace deals with pace in terms of pace of understanding, pace of developing proficiency in practicing essential skills and integrating them, pace by reason of learning styles and methods, pace by reason of time limitations and constraints for studying, and pace influenced by current personal limitations. For example, in my case, the time duration I could study on my computer when I started prep. So there are a lot of factors that influence pace. So it's important. Let your pace not be dictated by the pace of another student. Rather, focus on developing mastery at whatever pace you learn. Focus on learning. Focus on learning. It's important. Focus on learning, not on the learning pace of another student. And it's important that you also take practical steps to correct or change unproductive study habits and practices, because improving your study habits and practices will help to define a steady pace for your learning. Most times we tend to be bothered about pace a lot, and we lose focus on what we ought to be focused on, which is mastery. So take note of that. Yeah. So next, I'm talking about the effects of failing to focus on learning at your own pace. There are lots of effects, and I have a personal experience with respect to this. I remember when I was in prep, I was walking through the Ruby basics exercises, and I actually did that meticulously. I took quite some time there. I gained a lot within that period. And I realized there were some students maybe whom I started prep with, or maybe whom I sensed that we were within the same phase, more like the same area in prep. I realized they had already moved on, and they were already in they were already in the paid portion of the course. And I was wondering why. Well, like I was so worried that I was anxious and everything, and it made me. I tried to step up my pace, and I realized that I wasn't. When I did that, I realized I wasn't really learning from the exercises. Rather, I was just finishing them and I was moving on. And I had to pinch myself, and I want to know that this was not the right way for me. That the focus for me is on mastery, not on pace. And I had to go back to those areas which I glossed through, because I just finished them without really understanding, how they come together. Because that's how I learn. I'm a meticulous learner. So issues here that come up when you don't do that, more like anxiety. When you fail to focus on learning at your own pace, it brings up anxiety, and you have to deal with anxiety from wanting to rush, or from comparing yourself with others. And this can lead to discouragement, So I'm sure you don't want that for yourself. And okay, it also breeds negative emotions and low self-esteem. And this puts your motivation to learn and practice at risk. You feel that you're not good enough for this. Maybe this is not meant for you. There are some students I knew during prep that are no longer in the program now, because I don't know, maybe they experienced some difficulties with their learning, and maybe they felt they did not stay, they were not patient with themselves. They just wanted to move on. they just felt this was not for me because this is not for me because maybe it's not coming, it's not intuitive now, but for other people, it seems intuitive. You need to understand you're starting from when you started your journey, you started alone, and the skills you started with actually differ, and things you had, there are other limitations that you can that comes into play here. So focus on yourself and don't give room for negative emotions and lose self-esteem. And also, you also lose focus on mastery. When you fail to focus on that, you lose focus on mastery, as you learn. Yeah, so these are things you should have in mind, as you learn. So another thing is that you need to be ready to surmount challenges in the course of learning and developing proficiency in practice. You need to be ready to surmount challenges. It's important that you embrace the difficult parts and not give up when you get stuck. I'll give a personal example with this. When I was studying prep, I'd done quite well and I was happy with myself. I was going through the introduction to Ruby text. And I came to the conclusion of the last chapter there about when it was talking about additional, I think it talks about, the chapter that talks about additional things to know or something like that. And I came upon variables as pointers. Wow, this was quite, it wasn't a joke for me. This actually, it scattered the mental model I developed on variables. And I did not understand what that was talking about. I actually read that I had to learn variables as pointers for about a week, just variables as pointers. That's because when I tried to study material then, so this has to do with, for example, obtaining knowledge. You see, I'm trying to obtain knowledge. There are different things. And for some other person, that would have just been a walk in the park. But for me, it wasn't. It wasn't a plain field for me. It was a rock I had to climb, to move on. So I was wondering, each time I tried to learn this, my head I feel some pain in my brain. And I don't understand what was happening there. So I took some time to learn this. And it took me about a week to just learn variables as pointers, and that's fine. And now I've actually mastered it. And it's just a walk in the park for me now. So understand that you will actually face challenges on your journey. And you must be ready to surmount them. And to surmount them, you need to be patient. And you'll take it one piece at a time. You don't just expect to jump through and move on. Be patient with yourself and have a mind that is ready, that is willing and able to surmount these things. Next, we'll talk about, even in line with this same surmounting challenges, we'll talk about the need to practice systematically. This is important because it's important because when you encounter challenges in your learning, or maybe you're trying to solve a programming exercise, and you realize that you just feel as if there are some missing pieces that you need, that you need to actually solve that problem. And when you talk about missing pieces, they may not be missing pieces. There are things that you might have, you might know already, but you are weak in them. You've not developed proficiency in them, and you're experiencing weakness, and it seems as though that's missing. So because when you try to integrate all these skills together, the principles and all of that, there are lots of things that actually come out. And for those skills that you're not sharp on, it becomes amplified when you do that. So it's important first that you identify weak or missing essential skills in the course of your learning. I'll just read the quotes by Lauren Resnick. If students lack critical component skills, or if their command of those skills is weak, their performance on the overall task suffers. So if you're trying to solve a problem, for example, a programming exercise, and you're trying to integrate these components, and one of the components are weak, you realize that you have a lot of difficulty trying to solve that. You may not even solve it. Yeah. So sometimes that is what happens what happens when we try to work on problems. And it's important that after you identify that, you take initiative, to strengthen those weak and lacking essential skills through targeted practice. That's how you reinforce them. You target your practice towards strengthening those skills, and over time you realize that you develop proficiency in those things. Revisit them, practice the principles, the skills, the concepts. After you've identified this as an area of weakness, it's important so that after you've reinforced that, you can now incorporate the reinforced skill into your integrated practice. This would actually make your problem-solving process seamless. You're practicing reinforced skills in combination with the previously mastered skills and principles, within an integrated context to develop fluency. And sometimes when some persons go for the assessment, this is actually what they need to go back and look at. Maybe if they go for the assessment and they get a not yet, this is something that they can look into. You identify those missing skills. And the way you can do this is actually to practice mindfulness when you learn. You need to have a sense of what is lacking. Have a sense of what is lacking in or skills you're lacking in, and it will help you it will help you to give you an idea of things that you need to reinforce. Some students get stuck in a particular course for quite some time because of maybe they go for assessments, they get a not yet and stuff, and they just feel as these things actually, when you get a not yet over time, depending on your mindset, you get discouraged. But rather than being discouraged, you should take a systematic approach towards your practice, and this will help you on your journey to surmounting the challenge that has been hindering you from progressing. One thing I wanted to point out, for example, in problem solving, working on problems, one thing I identified as a weak link for me was understanding the problem. So I took some time, and I realized this when I practiced live coding with the students, and the students' process was so intuitive and clear, and I wondered, wow, this is possible. And I took some time and I started learning about how to understand the problem statement in programming exercises, and this helped my understanding of the problem. And now I apply the principles I've learned, and it's been helpful for me. Yeah, and I hope it grows incrementally for me as I practice problems the more. So I think you should think of that approach. It's going to help your learning as well. Next, I would like to point out that developing mastery requires sacrifice. It's important that you identify what you need to give up in order to make progress on your journey to mastery. For me, the things I've had to sacrifice includes time, comfort, finances, in this case, my savings, taking up a job offer after I left military service, and excuses and negativity, which would have hindered me from continuing on my learning journey. Take some time to think, identify the things you need to sacrifice you need to give up in order to make progress on your learning journey. There are things that you need to give up. So think about them. Yeah, because I think they may differ for us on a person-to-person basis. So on a final note, I would like to I would like to encourage you, whatever course you're currently studying or place you are on your journey to mastery, keep working. And I know you're wondering what device is that. I told you earlier that most times in terms of my journey, I experience and I still experience more than 12 hours power cuts, and I'm actually learning. This is an online program. So I actually had to get a device to help me to keep working, so that I don't get retired. So I've been keeping to it, and that's been helping me to keep work on the Launch School curriculum. Thank you very much. Yeah.
Thank you, Jesse, for this presentation. We will jump into the Q&A session now. So if you have any questions, go ahead and add them into the Q&A field, and we will go from there. We have a question from Lena, and the question is, has the language English been a challenge for you during launch school? And if so, how did you overcome it?
Thank you, Lena, for that question. Actually, the official language in Nigeria is English. So we use English for everyday business here. Yeah, so it wasn't really a challenge for me. I have a good command of it.
Thank you. Sahil is wondering, did you have a system to track your progress?
Wow. Okay. Thanks, Sally, for the question. In terms of the system to track my progress, at first, when I started working, I think in terms of my progress, it just has to do with having a sense of mastery. That's just how I track my progress. I also use basically how I track my progress is just by having a sense of mastery, just based on the components which I shared earlier. I obtain knowledge. I practice the component skills and I try to integrate them. And when I'm lacking in any of them, I just go back to it and I try to reinforce it. That's what helps me to keep track of how I'm making progress. And there's some concepts, or there's some things that I'm lacking in. For example, I just have a sense. I practice metacognition. As I said, for me, I just call that mindfulness. I'm just mindful when I learn. I try to have a sense of things I'm lacking in. For example, using maybe working with data, nested data structures. These are one of the things I just need to strengthen. I just have a sense of it and I go and I work on it. That's how I work. That's how I track my progress. Yeah, generally. Thank you.
Awesome. And then we have a question from Ryan. They're wondering, just curious how you deal with staying positive when you run into a topic or problem that causes you frustration.
Okay. How I try to stay positive is the fact that I understand that this is actually new information for me. This new information, and it may take some time for me to get a good grasp of what this information is about. You know, an information more like this is something that already exists. So I'm trying to get it into my brain. So I need to be patient with myself. You know, so when I'm patient with myself, it helps me to take the time to learn and acquire the information or the knowledge I need to learn, or the mental models I need to learn. And when I'm working on a problem, you must understand, when you're working on a problem, you must understand that the skills required to work on the problem, or more like to working on a problem, entails that you're integrating different components, not just one component. And it requires a different set of skill than just than you would do if you're just working on just one component. So be patient with yourself. It takes time to develop fluency. And so when you're trying to speak a language, it builds up over time. So just keep practicing, have a sense of the things maybe that you're lacking in that are not strong, then revisit them, reinforce them, then integrate them into your process. And for example, if you're having, the problem may be with the problem solving process, or maybe understanding the problem. You might need to take some time to learn how to really understand problem statements. This can be very helpful depending on what you sense to be the actual need that is lacking. So you just need to be patient. That's how I do. That was how I deal with it. I try to be patient with myself. Yeah.
Great. We'll just give it another minute in case there are any more questions. All right, Antonio is wondering, hi Jesse, thanks for your presentation. For you, what are the better tools and what helps you to learn the most in your journey?
Yeah, okay. Okay, in terms of tools, Thanks, Antonio, for that question. In terms of tools I use, I think Notion has really been helpful for me. It helps me to organize my notes better, and I use Anki as well. Though I don't practice it often because I never keep up to the time I set for myself to do that. So more like I use but it helps me over time. I just realized that I really don't need to practice Anki daily, to reinforce what I've learned. So, but I know when I practice it, I just realized this helps me to recall things. For example, there was a text and it helps you to retain your progress when you're learning the material. I realized there was a text I was reading, and the first time I did that, I didn't create flashcards on it. And I realized when I tried to recall some things on it, I think it was quite fuzzy for me. And what I did was, next time when I try to go through it, I just created flashcards. And now if I want to recall the parts that I've gone through, I just review my flashcards instead of trying to read the text. So when I continue with my reading of that particular text, I just move on from where I stopped. So I think that's one thing that has been helpful for me. And it's what am I better? That's the tools I use. Notion and Anki to organize my notes and for recall. And what helped you the most to learn most on your journey? What has helped me the most to learn most of my journey is actually making up my mind to learn what I need to learn, irrespective of the difficulties I may face with learning it, and irrespective of the time it may take me to learn it. As I said earlier, one of the difficult parts for me was actually understanding variables as pointers. It was difficult for me, yeah, and I took the time to learn it. If I sense something I need to learn, I take the time to learn it. For example, technical communication, talking about code, is something I practically, I learned when I observed how students were doing it. I took some time to learn that. And each time I talk about a piece of code, or more like talking about stuff, I ensure that I do that. I practice it consistently. So that has engaging my learning something by observation or by the text, and I practice it. That's one thing that has helped me to learn the most on my journey.
Well, thank you for the very thorough answer. And then we have one more question from Alonzo. Thanks, Jesse. Good presentation. My question is, do you have a task list for the day or week so you know when you need to move from theory to practice, to small problems, to code wars, or whatever else you do? Or do you just play it by ear and improvise what to study?
Okay. Okay, in terms of, thanks, Alonzo. Yeah. Okay, do you have, okay. First, when I started studying IRB 101, I actually created a schedule for my studies. But I realized I wasn't following that because there were other factors that made me quite unproductive. For example, I had issues with sleep because of I had to change due to the lighting issue before I got this device. I had to change my sleep cycle. So most times I'm usually up throughout the night. Then I try to sleep in the morning, and over time it messed up my sleep cycle, and I wasn't able to have more like a structured sleep. So at the point I was dealing with insomnia, I'm just healing from it now. And so in terms of the tax, okay, in terms of the tax, yes, I do have. So now that this year actually, I had created a new schedule for my studies, and because I'm getting better structure, more like I'm getting in better shape now. So I think I'll just share that with you briefly. I try to incorporate it, based on my experience, I try to incorporate quite a number of things. First, based on the current thing, I try to have live coding practice with a student. In terms of lunch school, that's the first thing I do in the day. I do that for about an hour. Then I go on to, based on the study schedule I created, I've not started working in that fully because I'm still dealing with some things for now. So I go on to study the lunch school lessons for 2 hours. Then after that, I try to also incorporate another live study session. And after I do that, I actually take breaks in between though, maybe 15 minutes break, 30 minutes break or something. Then I then I try to, I set a 2-hour problem solving session for myself daily. Then after I do that, I try to do my afternoon lessons for the lunch school program. Yeah, then once I'm done with that, I wrap up for the day. Yeah, so that's the structure I take. And yeah, so that's how I walk through it. I don't know if my response was in line with your question though, so. But I think I answered that.
Yeah, thank you. And Alonso, if you have any follow-up, you can post another question. And then Lena asked, has there ever been a time where you have no electricity and internet? If so, how do you make progress?
Yeah, there have been days where I actually have not been able to study because there was no electricity, and that was before I got this device. Yeah, and those days I just don't study. Yeah, so I just so it's those days I think I feel very frustrated. I think so it's in a bit to address this challenge that I had to get something to help power my laptop even if there is no power. So in terms of internet access, I do have internet access here. There are mobile service operators that provide internet access, and yeah, that has been quite stable for me on my learning. But sometimes it fluctuates, like some of the study sessions I've had with some students. It actually sometimes my internet service just goes out, but generally it's stable. Yeah. So within those times, I've not been able to make progress. But now, since I've got to that, I make progress on a daily basis. Yeah. Thank you.
All right, that wraps it up for Q&A. So I'll hand it over to Janae to wrap things up.
Yeah.
And thank you again, Jesse.
Yeah.
Thank you, Jesse. Oh, go ahead.
Yeah, I would like to thank you guys for attending this session. I am grateful for your presence. Yeah.
Thank you, Jesse, for all your insights on the journey to mastery. A lot of hard work has gone into all of this week's sessions, so we'd also like to thank everyone who has contributed by presenting, organizing, moderating, or participating. Remember, there are several more great seminars to come this week from other launch school students and graduates, so if you haven't already, stop by the social network on Slack, check out this week's schedule, and feel free to reach out about what you've learned from this session. Thanks for coming and have a great rest of your day. Bye, everyone.
Okay, bye. Thank you.